Hello, everybody, and welcome to this LinkedIn live session. I have to say, I've been really looking forward to this one. Since our last one last year with Steve, I've been really excited, looking forward to this one. So I'll get both Steve and Kris to introduce themselves first of all. Steve, let's go to you first of all. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Absolutely. Steve Dalton, author of The 2-Hour Job Search and The Job Closer, which we're here today to discuss. A longtime career coach at the business school at Duke named Fuqua. And in my past lives, I've been a chemical engineer, marketer, and strategy consultant.
A bit of a variation then in career over the time. And Kris, also known as Steve's #1 super fan, if you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Kris Thorne, and I'm an executive and career coach with 1080 and a facilitator. And yeah, once upon a time, my background was in big change management programs and transition. And now I help people make slightly different types of transitions, usually a lot of leaders going into transition for the first time, or a lot of career people needing to find jobs after they've unfortunately been let go. So big fan, obviously, of Steve's frameworks. I've seen them help a lot of people get jobs. So really excited to share that with y'all today.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Now, I as part of our lineup for the session today, I went back and watched our session last year, and I picked out a few notes that I want to share with everybody. That's really to plug. Go and watch the other session if you haven't, and also buy Steve's other book if you haven't as well. So we'll get those sales up as well. It's not like it's not QVC today, but there's some really fantastic things in the book. I remember, Steve, you telling me and Kris in the first book had been successful with a lot of people. They'd asked you for interview books that you recommended, to which you commented, I'll do it the polite way, that you hate them. Because they're all, the comment you made really stuck me with me was they're all tips and no instruction. And the comment you made to me the other day when we were lining up for this session was, nothing is accountable when it's presented to you in the form of tips you can't replicate, but you can with instruction. So, and I know that you see the Job Closer almost as a set of recipes for all of the steps before and after networking to help people become more effective in less time. So really want us to jump into that, because it is a really fascinating subject. But the bit that really resonated with me last time, and I think with a lot of people that contacted me afterwards, was that biggest takeaway was the energy management challenge. Don't use up all your energy on the wrong things. And I know that's something we're going to be talking about today. So my first question is, I love the style of the book, by the way. I'm really like it. Here it is for everybody. That's the first plug. So Steve, you've got a really distinctive style. Can you tell us a bit about how you arrived at that style, please?
Absolutely. I don't think it ever occurred to me to write it any other way. It's in a Q&A format where I'm talking to a hypothetical job seeker. And that was really informed by my 17 years in the trenches, every day working with hundreds and hundreds of students who had different challenges, but you started to learn some common themes. I wanted the reader to feel like they had an advocate in the book. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm skeptical about everything, and I want my readers to be skeptical of everything that I say. I want everybody to be an informed consumer. So I thought it was important to have a skeptical voice having a chat with me about, okay, Steve, you think this is right. What about this? Why not that? And to be able to represent all of the questions I'd gotten in my office over decades. So that it was the only possible way I could write the book in my mind. I never entertained the idea of writing it any other way.
Brilliant. Okay. And Kris, I know you really like that style. What is it that you like about it that's so useful, do you think?
I think, firstly, just in terms of being able to dip in and out of the book, I mean, it's exceedingly well laid out in terms of the structure in terms of, I love like the FAQs, the bullet points, the tables, the timings of how much to spend on different activities. You can just nip to the appropriate point in the book for whatever it is that you need help with, whether it's a CV, an interview, negotiation, etc. So it's not like you have to read this thing cover to cover to get value from it. You could dip in and out. I particularly do like the troubleshooting ones. And one troubleshooting point that you wrote, which I just really resonated and I thought was worth sharing with our job seekers today, was that you said, I just see too many job seekers avoid making good faith attempts to get the job they really want because pursuing that safe option just feels so much safer than making a desired change. I think that's probably one of the most important troubleshooting questions that is raised in the book, because I see this time and again with job seekers is that, especially if you're under pressure financially, which is completely understandable, that we need something fairly swiftly. But it takes as much time to look for a job that you really like as it does to look for one that you're having to settle for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important point. And with the processes and the frameworks in the book, you can see how to achieve that in just as much time as you would have spent looking for the job that you absolutely hate, but you feel you got to take.
What really came across to me in the book, Steve, was that Q&A side of things. I felt like I was having a conversation with you. And because we'd met, I was hearing your voice, and there was one question where it said, should I do this? And I heard your voice saying, no. No, don't do that, Dean. This is what you need to do. And I think that's probably something for anybody who's not read the book yet. Is one of the most helpful things, because of it really resonates with that instruction, not tips, because it's saying, no, don't do that, do this, but this is why. So if I move into my second question, I'll put on the screen here then. So what was the thought process about how you structured the book then, Steve?
It took a long time to figure it out, because these were the recipes from everything before and after networking. So the 2-hour job search is basically an extended recipe for turning a stranger into an advocate systematically for the purpose of getting that first interview. And this book was born out of, hey, I got an interview. What interview books do you recommend? And they're all the same problem. It's all tips instead of instructions. But part of the structural problem was that I had recipes for things that happened early in the job search, like figure out what you want to do. I had recipes for things in the back end of the search, like answering, tell me about yourself, or negotiating. There wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to how to put all of those disparate recipes together. So what I landed on was breaking it up into 3 pieces, like a good consultant would. Everything is a list of 3. But there's a collection of recipes for wayfinding, figuring out what you want to do, what you should be aiming at, getting those legacy tools together in as efficient and effective a way as possible. Your resume, your CVs, your cover letters, you're figuring out what you want to do with your life. The middle third is during the interview itself. So here are some recipes to answer questions that we know are coming in our interview. Effectively with minimal cognitive load. And then after the interview, how do you excel once you've gotten the offer? How do you negotiate that well? How do you get promoted, keep your job if there are layoffs? So it's before, during, and after the interview are the three sections of the book.
Brilliant. And I think, having been the interviewer on lots of occasions, I can almost sort of reflect back and think of the number of people in interviews that would have benefited from reading this, reading the instructions that are in there, because I think probably one of the words that I've heard most in interviews is the word and it's because people haven't had that sort of preparation. And yet, as you quite rightly say in the book, most interviews somebody's going to say, tell me about yourself. So why not predict that and actually put together an informed answer of what that will, what that needs to look like, what it sounds like, how it feels like when you're saying it as well. So I loved that about the book, and that's one example of how we might use the book. There are loads of examples. So Steve, I'm going to stay with you. Tell us, it's your book. How should we use it?
This is more like a pure cookbook where you can jump into whatever section you're struggling with. If there's a topic that you would like to have more structure, or just let someone else do the thinking. Give me a fill in the blank framework, set of instructions for this task. I'm struggling with tell me about yourself, or I'm struggling with why do I want this particular job? I'm struggling with like how do I get this cover letter written in as little time as possible, but have it still be meaningful and helpful. So you can jump in at whatever sections that you want. It really is meant to be consumed a la carte if you need it to, but I would recommend reading it chronologically. I think there are a lot of topics that you think you may know, but we have a lot of dated information that's been, like sell yourself, has been burrowed into our brains from repetition for our entire lives. I would argue that sell yourself is a pretty outdated way of thinking in terms of job searching or filling others with trust such that they want to give you jobs and money. So I would encourage you to consume it chronologically, but then it's very easy to jump back in, refresh your memory on sections that you would like, or if you have a pressing need, an interview tomorrow, you can get a lot out of reading it for about 10 minutes. So it really is meant to be a source of relief, not a source of anxiety.
And Kris, I know you use the book a lot, and to say a lot is an understatement. I know you use it a lot in a coaching context. So how do you apply that to the coaching conversation in terms of the use of the book? Is it literally about going to the reference point, going to the right questions? Do you dip in, dip out? Tell us a bit more about how you use it from that in coaching practice with career clients.
Yeah, sure. So I a bit like Steve was saying, I will dip in and out with it depending upon where we are in the journey, if you like, where we are in the process. And I use it as much to, I guess, reassure and maybe kind of help people to kind of reframe how they see certain things like the CV or interviews or negotiation, because there's always significant beliefs and ideas that we have around those key areas because we want to feel in control of the process as much as we can. So I use them sort of twofold. So firstly, to kind of really look at a particular aspect. So how do we do our CV? How do we do, the biggest area I use them is with interview preparation in terms of those first few questions. And then we obviously go on into the other ones, but in terms of helping people to specifically rehearse what they're going to say in those interviews to get themselves across to best effect. But also, I think just even kind of getting people to, to kind of really rethink how they see where they're spending their time at different points in the process is actually quite eye-opening and hopefully quite reassuring as well.
Okay. And that comes back to that energy management challenge again, doesn't it, Steve? That the three of us were talking about as part of the 2-hour job search is, it's actually refining it. So you're spending more time on doing the right things.
And everybody out there, I want to say, give yourself credit. The job search you're doing now is so much harder than the job search your parents had to do, and especially the one your grandparents had to do. Your parents and grandparents had to do CVs. They had to prep for interviews, but they never had to do LinkedIn. They never had to do proactive networking. The market, they had geographical protection. There weren't online job postings. They could look in a newspaper, apply to a job job opening that they saw there, hope they were one of the top 5 out of the 12 who apply, and get an interview. I mean, it was much, much easier, much simpler. The problem is you don't have more hours in a day to do your search. So the time for LinkedIn, for the social media, for looking through online job postings has to come from some other part of the job search because we don't have more hours in a day. So it is critical. Yes, you could always spend more time on something, but that has to come at the expense of something else. And this is really meant to acknowledge that you only have a finite amount of hours in a day. Here's how to best apply them.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things we've been talking about, and it's sort of come up about, different ways of doing things, or we are almost pre-programmed to do things in a particular way. And one of the other areas that I really like about the book is about, you talk about challenging conventions, myth busting, unlearning that we already know, which is language that I absolutely love, and it's really sort of my bread and butter when it comes to coaching, or things that you already assume, and how we undo those. So my next question is about those, challenging those conventions. Is what are the biggest conventions that are challenged in the book. Steve, I'll go back to you again on this one, if I may, first of all.
There's lots of conventional wisdom I hate in the job search space. I think the two that I have a special level of hell reserved for, sell yourself, which I mentioned earlier. I wish that would die a fiery death. I think it hurts people. I just literally, it hurts people when you tell them to sell themselves. I was a chemical engineer. I'm always been at odds with the people thing. And I had a lot of classmates who struggled with forming relationships and being charming and charismatic. But we all needed jobs too. And when you tell an awkward person to go sell themselves, that doesn't go well. No, like nobody benefits from that. Nobody likes that. So that is flawed advice. It works for some people, and the people for whom it works intuitively don't need to hear it. They're already doing it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a time and a place to sell yourself, and it's in the interview, and not even at the start of the interview. It's in the middle of the interview. And even then, don't even think about it as selling yourself. You're just telling stories. So I think it is dated. It's cheap and free and easy for coaches to say, but without giving thought to how it gets implemented, it becomes problematic. The second piece of advice that I just thoroughly dislike is the job search is a full-time job. That's just not reasonable. What about people who already have full-time jobs, or maybe multiple full-time jobs? Like, how do they job search? Like, it's again, I think it's abdicating responsibility as an ethical career coach to just tell people, if what you're doing isn't working, do more of it. Spend more time on doing what isn't working. That's the definition of insanity. So getting people to see that you can achieve more with less time by being more strategic, by not trying to do everything on your own, recreate the wheel, find good recipes that already exist, borrow those, see if those work for you. I think that's what we do in every other realm of our life.
Yeah.
We would never like Google list of ingredients for a cake. We would look up a recipe for a cake, and we'd see if that recipe worked for us. And if we liked it, we'd keep using it, maybe modify it. And if we didn't like it, we'd seek out another recipe. I think the job search should be no different. I just don't know of any other recipes that are that specific that help people just, here's an answer that you can interact with, see how it feels. I just don't know any alternatives to what I teach, though, that are as prescriptive.
I love that both of those are two of the biggest conventions that challenge that you like. For me, when you were talking about the sell yourself, I'm instantly transported back to, let's say, a less enjoyable experience as being interviewed, where the person, it was a sales role, and they said to me, "Sell me this pen." and I thought, yeah, if you're asking me that question, I'm not sure I want to work here. Kris, what about yourself? What were the sort of biggest conventions that you found were challenged in the book?
Well, I mean, yeah, as you say, Steve, there's loads, but I mean, a few that have jumped out to me. I think one that I think probably ties back a little bit, kind of bridges quite nicely between this and the 2-hour job search, is this idea, of course, that we're always told that, it's a numbers game. You just need to apply to as many things out there as possible, and sooner or later you're going to get something. Whereas obviously what we're advocating here, from a time and energy, and let's be honest, a mental health point of view, is, a targeted and specific approach is the way to go. And I was particularly interested in the myths that you had specifically around CVs and interviewing. So in the CVs, because I mean, people that I work with, CVs are one of the first things people want to have in place because they want to feel like it's something we can control. We feel more confident we've got it because everybody asked for it. And to be honest, sometimes until we've actually done the CV, we don't really even know how to get across what we've done and the value we can add. But people spend an inordinate amount of time on them and worry about them getting through with the keywords and, have I got the right bullet points and this and that. And there's a couple of sections in the CV. You said, well, yeah, objectives, no, don't need that. Skills and abilities, no, don't need that. What we need is some good targeted accomplishment statements under the different roles. But equally, what I was just reading today was that you don't need to necessarily put in, I was responsible for X. These achievement statements should be like your greatest hits, like the big bang things that you want to talk about in an interview. So there might be less of them, but they'll be more targeted and they'll be more achievement based. So I just wondered if you just speak a little bit to the whole CV situation, because there was lots of research in there about, the depressingly short amount of time people even spend looking at a CV. And that was one of those were some of the biggest conventions that I saw. And then I'd love to touch on the interview conventions with you as well.
Yeah, the Ladders did a study famously many years ago where they hooked hiring managers' eyes up to eye tracking software, and they found on average they were spending 6 seconds reviewing a resume each time. We've heard variations of that. That's not surprising to me. What was surprising to me was that 80% of their attention was on the following items: what companies you worked for, what your job titles were, what your dates of employment were, what schools you attended. These are not the things job seekers stress out about when they do their resume or CV. They're stressing out over the bullet points, the finessing, wordsmithing, those elements. And employers are voting with their feet. They don't care. What they care about is your pedigree, because your pedigree is defensible. They are looking for someone who's done this job before so that they can have you do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I wish recruiters would be more upfront about that and just say, instead of saying, well, you've got to customize your resume to meet the needs of the job posting. That's not how they're consuming the resumes, though. I wish they would just say, please don't customize your resume. The information we're most concerned about are the items that you can't change. That would be more human and humane and honest. It would do both sides a service. To me, I think that is so damaging, because people spend so many hours on this fool's errand that doesn't move the needle when recruiters care far more about your objective information than your subjective information. So a big platform of the job closer is to say, focus on getting your resume objectively perfect and subjectively good enough, because the subjective content, those bullets, don't move the needle. It's the objective information that does. And if you are a career switcher, the objective information won't move the needle. So that brings you back to networking and the 2-hour job search if you want to make that happen. But employers are really good at sniffing out who wants to get better at a profession versus who is just hoping to get another job for income. And that's where senior professionals really run into difficulty that you mentioned earlier, Kris, when you said, like, oh, I think I have an easier chance at doing what I did before, even though I'm kind of over it, but I have experience. Employers know you don't want to get better at it anymore, though. They can detect like your lack of energy, your lack of enthusiasm. You're not able to speak to trends or how you're staying up to date on the market in quite the same way. It's the same amount of work either way. Focus on things that you want to learn about, because you'll get better quickly.
Okay, brilliant. We've had a question come in, and it's from my 1080 LinkedIn partner in crime, who hosts some of the sessions. And Alison said, Steve mentioned it's harder to get a job. Is there an average time you can see in the current market to get a job? That might be a how long is a piece of string question. But it's an interesting one, because probably some of the people do ask, isn't it? Or people do think about. So it's a really valid question to ask.
So much of I can answer that pretty straightforwardly. If you're a junior professional, someone with 10 years or less of experience, and you follow the recipes I lay out in the 2-hour job search and in the job closer, it will be between a 1 and 2 or 3 month series. Like it was 1 to 2 months pre-COVID. So now I would expect it to be slightly longer, because there's more competition from all of the layoffs going on. The twist with that is, like, following the recipes is challenging. Like, a lot of people are uncomfortable with certain elements of it. They disagree with parts of it, so they modify the recipes. And if you have the amount of flour in a cake recipe, the cake doesn't rise. If you don't add yeast, or you add yeast at the wrong time, it doesn't work. So oftentimes when people are having longer than expected job searches, from my perspective, they're not following the recipe the way it's laid out. So my advice to you would be, if you really want to accelerate the rate at which you get a job, follow the recipes exactly. They've been proven over decades with thousands of people. These techniques work. They don't give you results in X number of days, but it's all probabilities and statistics. Eventually they tend to pan out. And once you get that first layer of advocacy out there looking on your behalf, you are exponentially more effective. It's not just you searching, it's you plus the 7 people that know and like you and want to see you succeed. So it's 8 people searching on your behalf, but that takes time to develop those relationships, and you got to start that now. You've got to plant the seeds now so you can harvest them in the fall. A lot of people think it's a fundamental stress or anxiety in the job search is, how do I have time to network? I need to apply. But if you apply first, network second, you will never get around to networking. There's always going to be another shiny job posting to distract you. And the response rates on those applications are approximately 0%. So you're racing to fall down a black hole. If you do networking first, you will have plenty of time to apply after you're done networking for the day. You get to a point where you're simply waiting for people to get back to you, but I get it. It is stressful. It is uncomfortable. It is unfamiliar to us. You've never been trained to do it. But that's what I'm trying to do with my books, is give anyone access to a library card, the chance to follow a set of instructions that will produce predictably positive results over time.
And I think,
sorry, can I just add real quick, off the back what you said, Steve? With the networking and the applying, what I've seen with job seekers is that if they go down this networking route, sometimes there isn't a need to apply in that formal sense, because you get into a conversation with people, you start talking about what they need, what you can offer. And I have seen people have conversations like this, and a role is then developed for them, as in it's just, we'd like to hire you and we will write a job description to fit the role that, we want. So you just can't beat networking, really can't, as opposed to, sitting there most of us that I've seen really hate sitting there trying to wordsmith these CVs and cover letters. It drives us up the wall. Thank goodness for AI. But even that requires effort. But where conversation, you are far more likely to come across and sell yourself as a human being and get somewhere, I think.
Yep.
Now I'm a little bit conscious of time, and there's another banner I'm going to put on the screen, because this is my favorite bit now. This is the bit I'm really keen to get the answers on. So I've already talked about how I really like how you talk and you interact with the reader. You ask and answer questions in the book and I really think they're the questions that a lot of people would ask you if they were there face to face. So I really like how the book's constructed in that way. I like that there's a chapter checklist and there's troubleshooting at the end of each chapter. And I really love this idea that the book is a recipe book, which really leads me on to this question, and that is, what's your favorite recipe in the book? Favorite recipe or framework? Steve, when I asked this, when we were doing the setup for this, you instantly said, I know which one. Mm-hmm. And I've been #intrigued ever since. So go on and tell me, what's your favorite recipe or framework?
Hands down, it is the FIT model for answering Tell Me About Yourself. Born out of a personal trauma. I was on my internship during business school, and the CEO walked into a happy hour that I was attending with my fellow interns, said, thank you, it's great having you this summer. Tell me about yourselves, and looked at me to go first. That's the thing about Tell Me About Yourself. We don't know it's coming in most cases. We know it's coming in an interview, so therefore we should be really prepared for it. And that doesn't mean fully memorizing an answer, because that's not very likable, but a whole other story there. So I was flustered and fumbled for words, and everybody else had a minute of watching me flounder to collect their thoughts, but I had to go first. And so I realized it would have been really handy to have a fill in the blank framework to manage that answer in a likable and effective way. So the FIT model, rather than bragging about what you've done or your qualifications, it leans into storytelling. Bauer and Clark back in the 50s identified that if you give people a list of facts woven into a story, they're 6 to 7 times more memorable than if you just give people a list of facts to memorize by themselves. So storytelling is an incredibly effective way to convey information. That's why we tell kids stories when they're growing up, because it helps them remember important lessons. But rather than trying to impress people, it's more about telling a true story well. And stories the pieces of a story are connected by buts and therefore not and thens. So when you get people who run into trouble in their Tell Me About Yourself answer, it's always, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did this, and then I changed companies. All the interesting stuff, changing companies, changing jobs, that's stressful. There's a story there, and you're skipping right over that to tell me what is already in your resume. And I've already seen it. So instead of talking about what you did, give your favorite part of what you did. It's likable. People assume you're good at it. It's superlative, so that makes it interesting. There's only one thing. You could have chosen anything. You chose that. But if it were the perfect job, you would have stayed forever. So there had to be an insight. There's the I in FIT that led you to make a transition, which is the T in FIT. And then you lather, rinse, repeat that.
Brilliant. Kris, very
Well, I'm laughing because obviously that is my favorite framework as well. And it is the one that I've used so much with other clients, but I'll share another one just to kind of broaden the conversation. So, but the reason I like it is because, no one has any trouble remembering their own personal story, and you just come across well and you make an emotional connection, and it's memorable because they will remember a story. And the other one I like that builds on that is I think it's the RAC, so reason, anecdote, challenge. So when you're talking about, well, the reason I'd like to work at this role, this job, this company is, and then you give them an anecdote, which is again a story, which you use to demonstrate your skills or abilities or what's important to you or your values. And then you connect the dots for them, because often that's what they need in an interview. Is they need to see how your skills and abilities fit with that job, or to be honest, they need to see how you see that your skills and abilities are going to fit with that role. So making that connection for people, I think, and joining the dots are huge. But the value of both of them is you say, it's the storytelling, and you remember it because it's personal. Obviously, you've got to take the time to sit down and identify the story, which obviously building the CV is a helpful way to do that. But at the end of the day, you just come across more relaxed and more human and more you, I think. And isn't that really what you want in the next role that you're in, is that you need to be able to be authentic, because if you're not going to stay there very long.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of doing less work rather than more work. And if there's a fill in the blank framework and you just have to focus on filling the blanks, that's so much easier than starting from a blank page and answering, why do you want to work for this company? Like, ouch. No, this is millions of people have answered this question before you. There should be a recipe or a fill in the blank framework you can lean on that conveys the right information. Why should we leave it up to novice job seekers who are doing their first, second, fifth, or 10th job search to figure out what content the interviewer wants to hear? Aren't career coaches in a better position to curate some usable format, some set of guardrails to keep people on the right path, to ensure they deliver the information a recruiter wants to hear? Tips are not the responsible way to do that. Instructions are. I'm not saying my recipes are perfect for everyone, but I am saying they are a recipe. They are accountable. I would love to see other people come out with their own recipes, and then we can debate the pros and cons of different approaches. But until then, this is the only game in town as far as I know. So I would really love to get us to debating one recipe versus another, instead of one recipe versus like, figure it out for yourself, we're all snowflakes. Like, no, I mean,
you've
decades.
You've given me the idea for another LinkedIn live session. So you can expect
the wheels turning already, Dean.
Well, I dodge things that recruiters throw at me.
Yeah. There are some more questions that we're going to run out of time on. So what we'll try and do is we will, in the comments, we'll try and engage with some of those questions on the LinkedIn conversation afterwards. As everybody can probably tell from watching today or watching on repeat, this is definitely one of those sessions, subjects that we could talk about for hours. I want to say thank you to Kris for coming along and being our #1 super fan again. But a huge thank you to Steve for coming along and joining us again. One last little thing, Steve. The 2-hour job search came out in 2012. The job closer came out in 2021. Please tell me I've not got to wait until 2030 for book 3.
I don't write the books so much as I channel them. It's whenever my brain fills up, I've got to get it out, and so I can think about other things like laundry. We'll see when my brain fills up and how Penguin Random House feels about that rate of production. But I'm always thinking.
So that's not a no to a third book, everybody.
Not a no. Hopefully we'll have some good news to share in the coming months.
So thank you again. I just want to signpost our next session, which is Coping with Change, on Wednesday the 7th of May. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Kris. Thank you, Steve, for joining us. And I'll bring the session to a close right now.